My name is Darnell Cousins. I am 41 years old, and on a Friday evening in the first week of November, I sat at the kitchen table of the house I had wired every outlet in with my own hands, holding a pen over a set of divorce papers, and I had every intention of signing them before the night was through. The world knew what I was, a journeyman electrician who drove a white work van with a magnetic sign on the side and kept his tools in order and his invoices paid on time. Renata's husband. The quiet man at the end of Birchwood Lane in Binghamton who fixed his neighbor's busted breakers on Saturday mornings and never sent a bill. A man who had built a decent life out of decent work and asked nothing from anybody that he hadn't already offered first. What the world didn't know, and what Renata herself did not fully know, was the particular math of the last 9 years. The hours I had logged on overnight commercial jobs around Memphis that I never mentioned at the dinner table. The account I maintained at a second bank, not hidden in any dishonest sense, but private. The way a careful man keeps a separate set of tools for jobs that require more precision than the everyday ones. There was $43,000 in that account as of that Friday evening. Every dollar of it earned in silence, for a purpose I hadn't found the language to explain to my wife. In my jacket pocket, folded in thirds, was a letter from my attorney confirming the filing terms. On the table in front of me was the pen. The pen had been sitting there since 6 o'clock. It was now past 8, and I had not signed anything, which should have told me something. But I was tired in the particular way that comes from spending months building toward a decision you haven't let yourself fully feel yet. Renata had been at her mother's house in Orange Mound since Thursday morning. She did not know I had an attorney. She did not know about the papers. She did not know that I had spent the better part of 3 months trying to understand where my marriage had gone, and had come to the conclusion, quietly and without rage, that it had simply run out of whatever it was built on. What she did not know, and what I was about to find out she did not know, was going to change everything I thought I understood about the last 9 years. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Darnell Cousins had grown up on the north side of Memphis, in a house his grandfather had bought in 1961 and maintained with a devotion that bordered on reverence. His grandfather, a man named Curtis, had been a plumber by trade and a philosopher by habit. And he had a particular way of delivering wisdom sideways, in the middle of something else, so that by the time you understood what he'd actually said, you were already halfway across the room and carrying it with you. The thing he said most often, hands deep in a wall or crouched under a sink, was this: electricity doesn't care what you think it's doing. It only cares what it's actually doing. You want to understand a circuit? You follow it all the way through. Don't stop where it gets complicated. Darnell had taken that instruction into his work and, eventually, into the way he read everything else. He followed things through. He did not stop where they got complicated. He'd gotten his journeyman's license at 24, his contractor's license at 31, and for the past 6 years, Cousins Electrical had operated as a licensed sole proprietorship handling commercial and industrial work across Shelby County. The firm had pulled $318,000 in revenue the previous year. His largest single contract, a rewiring job for a distribution facility on Lamar Avenue, was scheduled to close out by December, and the final payment alone would clear $74,000. None of this appeared on the joint tax return he filed with Renata, because none of it had technically existed when they married, and he had, in the way of men who build things quietly, simply never found the right moment to explain how much it had grown. He was not hiding it in any way that felt dishonest to him. He was keeping it the way his grandfather kept the good tools, separate, cared for, reserved for the work that required the most of you. He had met Renata 9 years ago at a church function he'd been dragged to by his cousin and had no intention of enjoying. She'd been helping serve food in the fellowship hall, wearing an apron over a yellow dress, and she had handed him a plate of chicken with such complete authority, as if she had personally guaranteed it was the best chicken in Shelby County, that he had laughed out loud before he could help himself. She'd looked at him sideways and said, "You're welcome," like she'd done him a favor he hadn't yet recognized. He'd found an excuse to talk to her for the next 2 hours. They'd married inside of 18 months. For most of those 9 years, Darnell would have called the marriage good. Not easy. Nothing real was easy, but good in the way that mattered, which was that he trusted her and believed she trusted him, and they had built something between them that felt like it could hold weight. Something had shifted in the past year. He couldn't have named the exact moment, the way you can't always name the moment a connection starts to corrode. You just notice one day that the current isn't moving the way it should. Renata had grown quiet in a way that was different from her ordinary quiet. She answered his questions with the minimum number of words. She stopped volunteering things. There were evenings she looked at him across the table with an expression he couldn't read, something assessing in it, and then she'd look away before he could ask what it meant. He'd told himself it was the miscarriage. 14 months ago, the second one, and that grief had landed on Renata in a way Darnell had watched from the outside of, without knowing how to reach through. He'd given her space because she'd asked for it. He'd given her time because it seemed like what she needed. He'd kept his own grief in the place he kept things he didn't have words for yet, which was somewhere he was starting to understand might have been the wrong place all along. By September, the space between them had become something else. Not grief. Something more deliberate. She started leaving rooms when he entered them, not obviously. Not with any drama, but consistently enough that he began to feel it. He came home one evening in October to find that she had moved the spare toothbrush he kept on her side of the sink to his side, without mentioning it, and he had stood in the bathroom for a long time looking at that small rearrangement. He called the attorney the following week, not in anger, in exhaustion. A circuit that isn't carrying current isn't broken in any dramatic sense. It just isn't doing what a circuit is supposed to do. The papers had been drawn up in the last week of October. They had been sitting in his attorney's office for 11 days before he'd picked them up that Friday and brought them home. He'd set them on the kitchen table, put the pen beside them, and made himself a cup of coffee and sat down to do what he had decided to do. The pen sat there for 2 hours. At 8:15, Darnell put the cap back on the pen, folded the papers along their original creases, and put them in his jacket pocket next to the attorney's letter. He got in the van and drove south toward Orange Mound, because he had decided, in the way he decided things that were important, without fully explaining it even to himself, that he needed to see his wife. He had not called ahead. He told himself it was because he didn't want to start a conversation he wasn't ready to finish. The truth, which he understood more clearly later, was that some part of him was following the circuit all the way through, the way his grandfather had taught him, not stopping where it got complicated. Renata's mother, Gloria, lived on a street called Haverford Court, in a house she'd owned since before Renata was born. It was a small house, well kept, with a porch light that Gloria kept burning from dusk until well after midnight, on the principle that a dark porch invited trouble. Darnell had been coming to this house for 9 years. He knew its particular sounds, the way the screen door announced itself, the low particular creak of the second porch step. The gospel station Gloria kept on in the kitchen from early afternoon until she went to bed. He parked at the curb and sat in the van for a moment. The porch light was on. 2 windows at the front of the house were lit. Through the thin curtains of the front room, he could see the blue flicker of the television. A car he didn't recognize was parked in the driveway, but Renata's was not. He checked his phone. No messages. He got out of the van and walked up the front path and was 2 steps from the porch when he heard his wife's voice through the front window, which was cracked open against the unseasonable warmth of the November evening. He had not intended to listen. He had intended to knock. But the voice came through that inch of open window the way voices carry through old houses. Private in intention, unguarded in volume, shaped by the assumption that no one on the other side of the glass was there to receive it. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, Mama." He stopped. His hand was raised toward the door. He did not complete the knock. Gloria's response, lower but distinct. "Keep your voice down. These walls carry further than you think." Then Renata again. And this time her voice had dropped to something that was almost not a voice at all. More the shape of one. "He's going to leave me, Mama. I can feel it. And I don't know how to tell him what I've been carrying because I don't know if he can forgive me for carrying it alone this long." Darnell stood on that porch with his hand still raised, and the November air settling into his jacket, and the gospel station just barely audible from the kitchen, and he did not move for a long time. What he did not do was knock. Not yet. Not because he was listening in the dishonest sense, but because something in him understood, with the instinct of a man who had spent 20 years following circuits through walls, that whatever was on the other side of that door was the thing he had been failing to locate for the past year. The thing the current had been trying to get to all along. His hands were steady. They were always steady. It was something he'd trained into himself so long ago that the training and the man had become the same thing. He walked back to the van. He sat in the driver's seat in the dark on Haverford Court for a long while. The porch light on Gloria's house threw a soft cone across the front steps. The second window was still lit. He could hear nothing from inside now, just the neighborhood's ordinary November sounds. A television somewhere. A dog 3 houses down. The specific hush that settles over a street after 9 o'clock, when the world decides it has done enough for one day. He thought about the word she'd used. Forgive, not whether he would find out, not whether she could manage the account or finish the paperwork. She had said, "I don't know if he can forgive me for carrying it alone this long." That was not the language of a woman executing a plan. That was the language of a woman who had been afraid of a conversation for so long, the fear had started to look like its own kind of certainty. He sat in that van and thought in the straight, careful lines that his work had always required. Not to conclusions, but through them, the way a good diagnostic followed a problem past the obvious answer to the actual one. Then he called his attorney and left a voicemail asking him not to file anything until he called back. He did not sleep well that night. Not from anger, which he half expected to find, but from something more like reckoning, the feeling of a man who has built a case against a person he loves and has just come across evidence he hadn't accounted for. An electrician who finds a wire he didn't know was there, doesn't ignore it. He traces it. He figures out where it goes and what it's connected to before he touches anything else. In the morning, Saturday, he drove to his mother's house in Whitehaven. Lucille Cousins was 71 years old and had raised 3 sons alone after Darnell's father died when Darnell was 11. And she had done it with a precision of spirit that he had spent his whole adult life trying to understand clearly enough to imitate. She was small and deliberate and almost never wrong about anything that mattered. And when Darnell arrived at her kitchen table at 9 in the morning with 2 cups of coffee from the place on Winchester she liked, she looked at him for about 4 seconds and said, "Something happened." What was it? He told her what he'd heard through the window on Haverford Court. He told her about the papers in his jacket pocket. He told her about the past year, the quiet withdrawal, the moved toothbrush, the assessment in Renata's eyes that he had never been able to read. His mother listened without interrupting, which was how she listened when she was thinking rather than just hearing. When he finished, she set down her coffee cup and said, "She said she's been carrying something. What do you think she's been carrying?" "I don't know," Darnell said. "Yes, you do," his mother said. "You just haven't let yourself know it yet." He sat with that for a while. The kitchen was warm in the particular way of houses that had been tended for a long time. A clock above the refrigerator that had been there since Darnell was a boy. The particular smell of her dish soap and the small potted plant on the windowsill she'd had so long it had become part of the architecture of the room. "The last bad thing that happened to you two wasn't the marriage," Lucille said finally. "It was that baby, and when something that large breaks over a house, the people inside it sometimes carry the pieces of it in different rooms without knowing the other one is doing the same thing." His mother looked at him. "Did you grieve it? Out loud, where she could hear you?" "No," Darnell said. His mother didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. He drove home and sat in the house on Birchwood Lane and thought about circuits, about what it means to trace something all the way through, about what it costs when two people are carrying the same weight in separate rooms and neither one of them knows the other one is doing it. He thought about the toothbrush on his side of the sink, about the evenings she'd left rooms he'd walked into. He had read all of those signals as withdrawal and had not once asked himself what she might have been withdrawing from, or whether the answer was not him, but something she was carrying that she hadn't found a way to put down. He had been following the wrong circuit. He'd been tracing the surface when the problem was 3 layers in. Real work happened in the preparation, not the execution. His grandfather had said that. You planned a job right and took the time to understand what you were actually dealing with before you touched a single wire. The job ran itself after that. He called Raymond Okafor, his business attorney, on Monday morning and asked him for a recommendation for a marriage counselor. Raymond, who had known Darnell for 6 years and never asked unnecessary questions, gave him a name without comment, a woman named Dr. Paula Hines, who kept an office on Poplar Avenue. He called Renata that afternoon and asked if she would come home. She was quiet for long enough that he thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Are you sure you want me to?" He said, "I heard you on your mother's porch Friday night." "Not all of it." "Enough." Another silence. Longer. Then, "How much?" "Enough to know there's something you've been trying to carry that I should have helped you carry a long time ago," he said. "And enough to know I haven't been any more honest about what I've been carrying than you have." She came home that evening. She walked in through the side door the way she always did and stood in the kitchen for a moment looking at the table where, 24 hours earlier, he'd had the unsigned papers laid out. The papers were in the inside pocket of his jacket in the closet. He had not thrown them away. He had not filed them. They were simply where they were, waiting. He made dinner. She sat at the table and watched him do it the way she used to watch him in the early years, when watching each other in ordinary moments had been enough. They ate and didn't talk about any of it yet, because some things require the courtesy of a meal first. After, they sat on the back porch in the November cool, both of them in the old canvas chairs he'd found at an estate sale the first year they were married and had intended to replace every year since. The porch light he'd installed himself illuminated a small circle of yard. The flower bed Renata had put in 3 summers ago, the gardenia she'd been nursing against the fence. She spoke first. After the second miscarriage, she said, "I went to a grief counselor. For 4 months. I paid cash because I didn't want to worry you with it." She was looking at the gardenia, not at him. "I know that doesn't make sense, but I was so tired of being a weight on you, Darnell. Everything we went through the first time, I watched you hold me together for 6 months, and I didn't want to ask you to do it again. I thought I was protecting you." He listened. And then she said, "There's a bill. From the second hospital stay, the one in February, before we knew for certain. It was more than the insurance covered. I've been paying it down myself for 8 months. $11,000. I worked extra shifts. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel like you'd failed to take care of me, even though you hadn't, even though you never have." He said nothing for a moment. The night was very quiet on Birchwood Lane. Somewhere down the street, a car passed slowly, its headlights sweeping across the fence line. $11,000, he said finally. She nodded. He thought about the $43,000 in the account at the second bank, the one he kept for jobs that required more. He thought about the way his grandfather had said it: electricity doesn't care what you think it's doing. It only cares what it's actually doing. "I've been carrying something too," he said, "and I should have told you a long time ago." He took her inside and sat her down at the kitchen table, and went to the study and came back with a folder. Not the divorce papers. A different folder, one he'd kept in the filing cabinet for 6 years. He opened it and set it in front of her, and he explained Cousins Electrical the way he should have explained it years ago. From the beginning, all the way through, not stopping where it got complicated. She listened. She turned the pages. She looked at the revenue figures, and then at him, and then back at the figures. 6 years, she said. 6 years, he said. I kept telling myself I'd tell you when it was real enough to be worth telling, and then it kept getting more real, and the longer I waited, the harder it got to explain why I had waited. She sat with that for a while. Then she said, "So when I was killing myself to pay $11,000 on my own, you could have just told me," he said. "And I should have told you why you could have just told me. That's mine to own." The kitchen was very quiet. The clock on the wall, the one she'd picked out the first week they lived in the house, counted through several seconds. Outside, the November wind came through the gap at the bottom of the back door the way it always did. The one he'd been meaning to weather strip since September. She looked at him for a long time. "How much is in that account?" She finally asked. $43,000, he said. She pressed her lips together. She looked at the folder. She looked at the clock. Then she looked at him and said, "I want to be angry. And I think I'm going to need some time to figure out how to be angry at you for hiding something you were building for us. And some time to figure out how to forgive myself for doing exactly the same thing from the other direction." "That's fair," he said. She slid the folder back across the table toward him. She didn't push it away. She just moved it back to the center, where it could belong to both of them. The divorce papers were in his jacket in the closet. He got up from the table and went to the closet and took them out and brought them back and set them on the table in front of her. She looked at them. She looked at him. "I want to try something else," he said. "If you do." She didn't answer right away. She turned the envelope over once in her hands, the way you handle something you've been afraid of long enough that the fear has become familiar. Then she set it down on the table between them. "I made an appointment with a counselor for Thursday," he said. "Dr. Paula Hines on Poplar. I think we should go together." She looked at the envelope on the table. Then she looked at him. She reached over and picked up the envelope and stood up from the table and walked to the kitchen drawer where they kept the things that didn't have a better place yet. Rubber bands, old batteries, a flashlight that needed new ones, and she put it in the back of the drawer and pushed it shut. "Thursday," she said. "Thursday," he said. They saw Dr. Paula Hines together for the first time that Thursday, and every other Thursday for the next 7 months. Some of those sessions were hard in the way that honest things are hard, not because they revealed anything monstrous, but because they revealed how thoroughly two people can love each other and still manage to make the other one feel alone. Dr. Hines had a quality of stillness that Darnell recognized, the kind that was paid for, earned through years of practice, not something she'd come into naturally. He respected it. What emerged over those months, session by session, was a picture neither of them had been able to see from inside the frame. The grief they had both been carrying from the miscarriages, each of them trying to bear it privately, to spare the other. The silence Darnell had inherited from his grandfather, the discipline of carrying weight without announcement, had become, inside his marriage, a wall he hadn't known he was building. The self-sufficiency Renata had learned from watching her mother raise 2 daughters alone had become, inside that same marriage, a refusal to be helped that felt to Darnell like a refusal to be needed. They had spent 9 years making the same mistake from opposite sides of the same conviction. That love meant protecting someone from what you were carrying. The $43,000 in the cousin's electrical account became, in December, the account they used to pay off the last of the hospital bill Renata had been quietly settling for 8 months, with enough left to fund the expansion of Cousins Electrical into a licensed LLC with 2 full-time employees. Something Darnell had been building toward for 2 years without telling anyone he was building toward it. Renata sat across from him the afternoon he had the papers drawn up and said, "Without any particular drama, I want to be part of this." Not a silent partner, a real one. He had never once considered saying no. Gloria came for Sunday dinner in January, a month after everything had finally been said that needed saying. She arrived with a coconut cake and a characteristic lack of ceremony, and sat at their table on Birchwood Lane, and ate with the appetite of a woman who had not been worrying about her daughter for 3 weeks. After dinner, she sat on the back porch with Darnell while Renata did the dishes inside. She looked out at the gardenia against the fence. She said, without looking at him, "I owe you an honest thing." He waited. "I've been talking to my daughter about leaving you for the better part of a year," she said, "not because I thought you were a bad man. Because I was scared you were a good one who was going to break her heart anyway by not seeing her. There's a particular kind of loneliness in being married to someone who carries everything alone. I raised Renata's father's daughter, and I've watched that loneliness do its work from close range." She paused. "I was wrong about what I saw in your house. I'm sorry for the year I spent helping her prepare to leave it. The night was cold. The gardenia was bare, nothing but stems against the fence until spring." Darnell looked at it for a while. "She showed me what she needed by not showing me," he said finally. "That's on me as much as anything." Gloria looked at him sideways in the particular way that Renata had inherited. "You sound like a man who knows how to trace something all the way through," she said. "My grandfather taught me that," he said. She nodded once, satisfied, and went inside to help with the dishes. Cousins Electrical LLC formally opened its 2nd year of operation the following spring with a crew of 4 and a contract for 2 new commercial builds in Midtown. Renata ran the books from an office they converted out of the spare bedroom on Birchwood Lane, the one that had been other things before it became this. She had a gift for the financial architecture of the business that Darnell had not anticipated, and would not have been able to describe before he watched her do it. The particular satisfaction of seeing someone find the exact work their mind was built for. On a Tuesday morning in April, Darnell came in from the first job site of the day and found her at the desk with a spreadsheet open and coffee going cold beside her, the way she worked when she was deep in something. He set a fresh cup next to the old one, and she looked up and said, "Without preamble, we're going to have a good year." He said, "I know." She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, quieter, "I'm glad you didn't sign those papers." "Me too," he said. She turned back to the spreadsheet. He went to change his work clothes. Some evenings now, after dinner, they sit on the back porch in the canvas chairs that he has still not replaced, and the gardenia against the fence has come back in full. White flowers against the dark wood, the kind of ordinary beauty that doesn't ask you to notice it, but stays available in case you do. He thinks sometimes about the Friday evening he sat at the kitchen table with a pen in his hand, and a decision he was certain he had already made. About the circuit he decided to follow instead of breaking. About the inch of open window on Haverford Court and his wife's voice moving through it toward him in the dark, carrying what she had not yet learned to carry toward him directly. He thinks about his grandfather under a sink, hands in the wall, saying, "Follow it all the way through. Don't stop where it gets complicated." A current that looks interrupted and a current that is interrupted are two different things. Sometimes what looks like an open circuit is just a connection waiting to be traced to where it actually goes. He still follows things through. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.